Washington Post with a story out recently from Jonathan Greenberg, who interviewed Donald Trump a long time ago in the 1980s to put him on the Forbes 400 list. Now, out of that story comes many revelations, some of which we already knew and I told you about, but people wouldn't believe it. It was already in the record. Donald Trump was never that rich. He's not that rich now. It's not even close. He was never a billionaire. He's not a billionaire now. It's not even close. And his whole life and his whole career, he's been a con man. Now, you're gonna see and you're gonna hear tapes of him actually pretending to be someone else because he's a buffoon. So let me begin this story and tell you Greenberg's recounting of what happened in the past, and then we'll dive into the actual numbers. They explain it took decades to unwind the elaborate farce Trump had enacted to project an image as one of the richest people in America. Nearly every assertion supporting that claim was untrue. Trump wasn't just poorer than he said he was. Over time, I have learned that he should not have been on the first 3 Forbes 400 lists at all. In our first ever list in 1982, we included him at $100 million, but Trump was actually worth roughly $5 million. By the way, you'll find out later, all of his money he inherited from his dad, built almost nothing on top of it. Just a privileged little prick is all he is, okay? So back then, oh yeah, I'm worth $400 million. We actually have facts. It turns out he was worth $5 million at most, at most. Okay, that's a lot of money. And if you earn $5 million from nothing, I'd say you're amazing and you did a wonderful job, etc. His dad just gave him the money, it's inheritance. He's such a loser. At that point, he hasn't even inherited. His dad's just giving him trust fund money. Spoiled little child. Okay, he's talking to Jonathan Greenberg at the time about the condos that his dad owns, but he's pretending to own. You're gonna hear that in tapes in a second. They're like, what Fred Trump seems to have about 8,000, at most 10,000 apartment buildings in Brooklyn, Queens, etc. And Trump says, oh no, it's 23,000, 24, 25,000 buildings. They're worth $40,000, right? And the guy goes, there's no way they're worth $40,000 at the time. This is in the 1980s. So Greenberg picks it up from there. He added that these were almost debt-free and worth $40,000 each. I questioned his valuation. Trump shrugged and said, okay, then $20,000 each. In other words, I'm making it up. What difference does it make? You're not buying 40,000, how about 20,000? How about 20,000? Turns out it's not 25,000 apartments, it's only 8,000 apartments. And it wasn't worth 40,000 or 20,000, they were worth about 9,000 or so, according to the best estimates at the time, which made his dad a very, very rich man. He could have left it at that, but no, it's not my dad, it's me, that's who did it. Fred Trump later said, look, my son's a very competitive guy, and I didn't want to compete with him, so I'm happy to give him credit. In other words, of course it wasn't Donald Trump. It was Fred Trump who built that and then gave this schmuck the money. In a 1990 court case, Trump testified that he had used false names in phone calls to reporters. So that's a fact that Donald Trump himself has admitted. Well, one of the false names was John Barron, and that's the name he used to call Jonathan Greenberg. And now, he wanted to go off the record. Now, people have used these tapes, and that's why I knew this story beforehand. Now we get more details. They have used these tapes because Donald Trump, it turns out, was lying the whole time. You know what, John Barron, you are off the record. But it turns out it wasn't John Barron, it was Donald Trump. That's not how off the record works. So you're gonna get to hear the tapes right now. So this is Donald Trump at the time calling, pretending to be a totally different person, bragging about how great Donald Trump is. Oh, that's so embarrassing. What a clown, listen.
Okay, what's your first name, John? John Barron. Well, let me tell you what the deal is, just so you understand. Okay. Mr. Trump bought, first of all, most of the assets have been consolidated to Mr. Trump, because you have down Fred Trump, and I'd like to talk to you off the record if I can, just to make your thing easier.
Okay, sure.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, but I think you can really use Donald Trump now, and you can just consolidate. I think last year somebody showed me the article, and I think you had 200 and 200. And really, it's been pretty well consolidated now for the most part. As I also think somebody had mentioned that you had asked about that, or somebody had, and it's been pretty well consolidated. Okay. So that's one point that you can.
Now, is that just is that including the residential?
Yes. Everything's been consolidated basically now, and over the last couple of years they've been working on it, and I guess that's sort of come out now, pretty much come out where people understand that, but it's been pretty well consolidated.
Okay, does Fred Trump make money management decisions?
Oh yeah, sure. He's the chairman. Donald's the president, and Fred Trump is active. He's an excellent guy, and you know how they're very close. The relationship of the two is, as you know, very close, as you've heard or know, or perhaps you don't know. But Fred Trump is active in the business too.
Yeah, we have this really strange technical thing, Mr. Brown, in terms of who is, who holds the equity. I mean, are you saying that perhaps for tax purposes, the ownership has been transferred to Donald Trump?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay, and would you say, in excess of 90% of the ownership, I believe?
I'd say in excess of 90. In fact, well, it's really closer to even the ultimate, but it's in excess of 90%, yes.
That's so Donald Trump. The constant senseless repetition and, well, and the obvious lies. Like, it's almost the ultimate. Ultimate what? He means like that Donald Trump almost has 100%. Which of course is not true. Fred Trump had it all at the time. And he's like, it's like the ultimate, but you could call it 90%, you could call it 90%. We're lying, so what difference does it make? 40,000, 20,000, whatever you want to agree to, okay? Just inflate the numbers, just make it seem like I'm really rich. Now, if you're wondering why, I mean, other than the fact that he's a pathological liar, he's a con man, etc., he would then use the Forbes list to get more loans. Now, he couldn't prove that he had the money when you go up for a loan, and you're gonna be amazed by this, but yes, people at those levels sometimes are this stupid. He goes, well, the Forbes 400 list says I have $200 million. So I must have $200 million. That's a little bit later. In the first one they claimed, as Greenberg explains, that he had $100 million. And so it was a huge business advantage for him. And look, Greenberg is now apologetic that he didn't catch it earlier, etc. But a lot of the media, man, they don't pay attention. When a rich or powerful guy calls in and says, I have this, they go, okay, yes, sir. And so they gave him a huge advantage he never earned. But the main point is shamelessness. Just like, I don't care. I can't even get an assistant to call in pretending to be John Barron. I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna change my voice, what, 2%? Or maybe 0%? And then pretend I'm that guy, and I'm just gonna lie nonstop about everything. I'm even gonna throw my father under the bus saying he doesn't even run the business anymore, I do. So now let's get into more details about how pathetic this is. He said, it would be decades, Greenberg did, it would be decades before I learned that Forbes had been conned. In the early 1980s, Trump had zero equity in his father's company. According to Fred's will, portions of which appeared in a lawsuit, the father retained legal ownership of his residential empire until his death in 1999, at which point he left it to be divided between his 4 surviving children and some of his grandchildren. So when Trump was pretending to be that rich all the way up to 99, it wasn't true because he had not yet inherited daddy's money. Sad. Continuing, that explains why after Trump's companies went bankrupt in the early 1990s, he borrowed $30 million from his siblings, secured by an estimated $35 million share of his future inheritance. He doesn't even have the money yet. He's like, but I'm gonna get daddy's money at some point, and I promise I'll give it to you. Okay, according to 3 sources from Tim O'Brien's 2005 biography, Trump Nation, he could have used his own assets as collateral if he'd had any worth that amount, but he didn't. All the way in the 1990s, pretending to be rich, has to borrow from his siblings because he doesn't have any money. Well, Donald, how are you ever gonna get money? I mean, I hear you're a real estate genius. Oh, not from that, when daddy leaves it to me. Sad, pathetic, baby, more. That most revelatory document describing Trump's true net worth in the early 80s was a 1981 report from the New Jersey Casino Control Commission. O'Brien obtained a copy for his book. Trump had applied for an Atlantic City casino license, and regulators were able to review his tax returns and personal and corporate debt, giving them the most accurate picture of his finances. In sum, Trump was worth less than $5 million, not the $100 million that I reported in the first Forbes 400, Greenberg says. So, by the way, the $5 million is giving him every benefit of the doubt. It's not even clear he has that much, and again, it's all from his dad. So, continuing, during our first interview, Greenberg explains in 1982, Trump informed me that he had bought the Barbizon Plaza Hotel and adjoining 110 Central Park West for just $13 million, a steal. While I was in Trump's office, a broker supposedly called to offer him $100 million for the property. Greenberg later realized, of course, that was a ruse and some associate who had called and pretending to offer $100 million. That's so transparent, so stupid, but people buy this crap. Anyway, Trump refused to offer while looking me in the eye. He pointed out that his net worth should include an equity boost of $87 million profit, yet tucked away on page 63 of the Casino Commission report was a section describing Trump's purchase of the property for $65 million, facilitated by a $50 million loan to Trump by Chase Manhattan Bank. As with many of his buildings, Trump's debt was far higher and his true equity far lower than he claimed. Whenever he has to go to court, and he has to be honest, otherwise he might serve a prison sentence, all of a sudden he goes, yeah, of course I invented characters and I called reporters and pretended to be myself, pretended to be someone other than myself. He has to go apply for a commission for a casino in Atlantic City. He's like, here's what I actually paid for it, because he can't lie about that, otherwise you're in a lot of trouble and again, could go to jail. So he's like, yeah, 13 million, I was lying. I bought it for 65 million. No debt, are you kidding me? I had to take $50 million in debt. By the way, when I reported on a lot of this during the campaign, almost all of the money that he borrowed was with his dad's co-signature in the beginning. Otherwise, nobody would loan this man-child any money without Fred Trump backing it up with actual cash and an actual stake in that they could take money from later if things went south, as they often did. Okay, more. Later attempts by Trump to paint himself as a fantastically wealthy were also duplicitous. In 1989, Trump sent Forbes journalist Harry Seneker a statement of his $3.7 billion net worth. I've obtained a letter. It indicated $900 million in liquid assets. Now, first, if you're confused, let me explain. That's just Trump writing on a piece of paper. I have $3.7 billion, $900 of it is in cash. That means nothing. It means less than nothing. It's almost certainly a lie, and in this case, proven to be a lie again. So, but according to the New Jersey Casino Commission, which issued another report in 1991, by the end of 1990, Trump's entire cash position in both his businesses and personal accounts was just $19 million. Remember, he pretended it was $900 million. The amount was insufficient to pay the debt on his over-leveraged casino and real estate holdings while still covering his personal expenses of $1 million per month. His net worth, the commission estimated, was $205 million, less than 6% of what he'd told Forbes. Again, the commission there gives him every benefit of the doubt, and then you've got the debts on top, and still it's 6% of what he pretended it was. At most, and all of it left from his dad and co-financed even the properties with his dad. Okay, the largest portion of Mr. Trump's fortune, according to 3 people who had direct knowledge of his holdings, apparently comes from his lucrative inheritance. These people estimate, this is a New Jersey appellate judge, it's not even Greenberg. This is a judge in a hearing in the year 2011 now. We're not in the 80s, we're not in the 90s, 2011. Comes from his lucrative inheritance. These people estimated that Mr. Trump's wealth, presuming that it is not encumbered by heavy debt, may amount to about $200 million to $300 million. That's in 2011. Assuming it's not encumbered by debt, that's a ridiculous assumption. Of course it's encumbered by debt. And that's how, first of all, nobody walks up to a giant piece of real estate in the middle of New York and goes, oh, it's $500 million? I've got $500 million cash, I'll give it to you. No, all of it is leveraged and all of it is with debt, and that's normal. Trump has usually more than normal debt, so of course that money's encumbered. He doesn't even have anywhere near that much, even though most of it, again, is from his dad. Finally, in 2016, Trump's presidential campaign put out a statement saying the candidate had a net worth in excess of $10 billion, and they capitalized it. So a judge in 2011 says at most $200 to $300 million. if you assume the wild and outrageous assumption that there's no debt on it, Trump turns around 5 years later and says, it's not 200 or 300 million, it's 10 billion, that's what it is. That's why he does scams like Trump University, trying to take $10,000 from poor schmucks who are giving their last dollar to try to learn from this idiot. So no actual billionaire does a scam like Trump University, where people pose with pictures of a cutout of Donald Trump, and there's no actual courses, and it's not an actual university. It's just meant to rob people of their money. He's desperate for money because he's always on the edge of bankruptcy. He went bankrupt 6 times in his career, 6 different businesses he bankrupted because he's an idiot man-child. The only reason why he's gotten this far, unfortunately, is the media. The media never bothered to check how much money he actually had. Then they gave him $2 billion in free media coverage during the Republican primaries. Handed all this stuff by people go, oh, well, he says it must be true. I mean, such a big lie, so big. All right, we'll cut it down by half and give him credit for that. No, don't give him credit for anything. Total pathological liar and con man. You just watched the video by the Young Turks, the home of the revolution. If you'd like to get the full show, come join us and become a member. tytnetwork.com/join.